The moment Brooke Whitmore said, "Come back here," I realized the movie had never been the reason she invited me. I had spent the entire evening believing we were two lonely neighbors sharing popcorn, pretending the awkward silence between us didn't mean anything. But when I stepped out of the car and started walking toward the front seats, her voice stopped me. I turned around, and there she was in the back seat, looking at me with a smile that was somehow nervous and certain at the same time. She patted the empty space beside her and whispered that the movie could wait. What I didn't know then was that those 4 words were about to change the way I looked at her, at myself, and at the life I had been trying so hard to rebuild. My name is Grant Mercer, and for the past 8 months, I had been living alone in a small rental house on a quiet suburban street. I had moved there after my life seemed to collapse all at once. A relationship I thought would last forever had ended badly, my job had disappeared during a company shutdown, and the city where I had spent most of my adult life suddenly felt like a place full of memories I couldn't escape. So I packed what I could fit into my old car and moved somewhere nobody knew my story. I told myself I wanted a fresh start, but the truth was simpler and sadder. I wanted somewhere I could disappear. That was when I met Brooke. She lived in the house next door, the one with the little white porch and the garden that always seemed brighter than everything around it. The first time we spoke, I was struggling to carry a broken bookshelf through my front door. She walked over, took one side without asking, and helped me get it inside. She didn't ask why I had moved. She didn't ask whether I had family nearby. She simply smiled, told me the neighborhood had terrible internet, and warned me that the old grocery store closed earlier than it claimed online. Somehow, that tiny conversation stayed with me. Over the next few months, Brooke became part of my daily life without either of us planning it. Sometimes she left an extra cup of coffee on my porch. Sometimes I helped her carry groceries. We talked about ordinary things, like bad weather, annoying neighbors, and movies we secretly loved. She had a way of listening that made even the smallest story feel important. But whenever our conversations became too personal, I pulled back. I was afraid that if she saw the broken parts of me, she would eventually decide I wasn't worth knowing. One Friday afternoon, Brooke knocked on my door and invited me to a drive-in movie. She said she had 2 tickets, too much popcorn, and absolutely no intention of sitting through a romantic comedy alone. I laughed and agreed. I remember feeling strangely nervous as I changed shirts 3 times before finally settling on something simple. It was ridiculous. I had known her for months. Yet that evening, walking toward her car beneath the soft orange sunset, I felt like a teenager going on his first date. The drive-in was almost full when we arrived. Families sat on folding chairs beside their cars, couples leaned against open trunks, and children ran around with glowing toys while the smell of popcorn drifted through the warm evening air. Brooke chose a spot near the back, where we could see the giant screen clearly. We settled into the rear seat of her old car with drinks between us and a bucket of popcorn resting on the console. For the first 20 minutes, everything felt easy. Then the movie began. I tried to focus on the screen, but every few minutes I caught Brooke looking at me. Whenever our eyes met, she smiled and quickly looked away. I wondered whether I was imagining something that wasn't there. Maybe she was simply being friendly. Maybe I was reading too much into everything because I had forgotten what it felt like to be close to someone. Halfway through the movie, Brooke suddenly shifted beside me and looked toward the front of the car. She said she needed a little more space and moved into the back seat, leaving me confused. I thought she wanted to stretch out, so I climbed out and started toward the front passenger side. That was when I heard her say, "Come back here." I froze. When I looked over my shoulder, Brooke was watching me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't playful this time. It was vulnerable. She reached over and turned off the movie audio for a moment, and the sudden quiet made the entire world feel distant. She told me she hadn't brought me there because she cared about the movie. She had brought me because she wanted one evening where we could stop pretending that there was nothing between us. My heart started pounding. I sat beside her again, but neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she admitted that she had noticed how I always pulled away whenever someone got too close. She had seen the way I avoided talking about my past. She had seen how I came home late just to avoid sitting alone with my thoughts. And she told me something that I never expected to hear. She understood because she had been doing the same thing. Brooke had lost someone important a few years earlier. She had spent a long time believing that loving someone again would somehow betray the person she had lost. So she built walls around herself and convinced everyone, including herself, that she was perfectly happy alone. But she said meeting me had made those walls harder to maintain. I wanted to tell her I felt the same, but fear grabbed hold of me. I told her she deserved someone who wasn't carrying so much baggage. Someone confident. Someone who knew what he wanted. Someone who wasn't constantly looking over his shoulder at the life he had lost. Brooke smiled sadly and told me that maybe I was wrong about what people deserved. Maybe people didn't need someone without scars. Maybe they needed someone who understood them. That sentence broke something open inside me. For months, I had believed starting over meant forgetting everything that had happened before. I thought healing meant becoming the person I had been before my life fell apart. But sitting there beside Brooke, I finally understood that healing wasn't about becoming the old version of myself. It was about becoming someone who could carry his past without letting it control his future. The movie continued playing in the distance, but neither of us cared anymore. We talked until the credits rolled, sharing stories we had never told each other. We laughed about embarrassing childhood memories. We admitted the things that scared us. We talked about the people we had lost and the dreams we had stopped chasing. And somewhere between one confession and another, Brooke reached for my hand. I held it. There was no dramatic kiss beneath fireworks. No perfect ending suddenly appeared on a giant screen. There was simply two people sitting in an old car, holding hands while the parking lot slowly emptied around them. Somehow, that felt more real than anything I had seen in a movie. When we finally drove home, Brooke stopped between our houses and looked at me. She told me she hoped I wouldn't disappear when morning came. I smiled and promised I wouldn't. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the heavy emptiness waiting beside me. I opened the curtains and saw Brooke standing in her garden with 2 cups of coffee. She lifted one toward me. I laughed, walked outside, and crossed the few steps between our houses. Sometimes, the person who changes your life doesn't arrive with a grand entrance. Sometimes they live next door. Sometimes they simply notice that you're hurting when everyone else assumes you're fine. And sometimes, the most important invitation isn't to a movie at all. It's an invitation to stop hiding. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, have you ever met someone who helped you open your heart again when you had almost given up on love? I'd truly love to hear your story. And if you enjoyed Grant and Brooke's journey, subscribe and turn on notifications, because every story we share is a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected moments can lead us exactly where we were meant to be.